Okay, so for this walkthrough, the goal is that we're going to start doing CSS Grid. We need to set up some external CSS for our Atom page for the walkthrough, because you guys are going to need to do that on your pages. And to start actually playing around with that. So we got to start laying out our layout for our page, and we kind of will start from like outside in. Okay. So I have my index opened, and to start off, I want to show how to, when we are opening up Atom, we can actually install some packages, and I had videos for actually installing Atom packages, so we'll kind of go through that real quick, because there's one that I would like you guys to download. It makes things easier. There we go. It just wasn't opening. Okay. So the welcome guide, this is where it's actually useful. We can install a package. So we can click install package, open installer, look for a package, and in this one you actually want to use Beautify. And you're going to look for Atom Beautify right here. I already have it downloaded, but this would be the one that you would click install. Okay. It'll take a little bit. Once it installs, then you can actually run it by clicking on packages and then clicking it and clicking Beautify. So it just helps to make sure that your HTML is indented all nicely and looks pretty and all that fun stuff. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's make sure that if you don't already have a project folder, that you have one added. We have ours. For this one, I'm just going to be working on the index because this is going to be kind of a lot. Okay, so we have our full page. We want to see what it looks like. Let's okay. Big images, everything. We got all of that stuff. It's all designed. Now what we need to do is we need to start doing some layout for it. Okay, so the very first thing that we need to do is, and I never remember the code, it's on W3 Schools, but basically what we need to do is, because our website could be on multiple different pages or devices, we need to have a way that we can get it. So in that previous video where I'm talking about the viewport, this is what we're pulling up. So this tag. We just need to copy and paste this in the Atom inside of our head. So somewhere inside of our head. And then we want to link to a new style sheet, but we don't have one. So let's go ahead and open up a new one. So Control N would create a new file, and then Control S to save. And then I want to save this in the same folder that I have my pages and all my pictures and everything. I'm just going to call it style.css. Click Save. And then in my index, I want to link to it. So I'm going to type link and tab. And I'm doing this in my head. Now for the href, I'm going to delete this part and type style, because that's the name of my file. And then I want to save it. Okay, so that should do nothing right now. But if we wanted to do something very quickly, I know the images are very large. So let's go ahead and fix those. So we'll target all the images and we'll give them all a width of, say, 80% of whatever they're in. Now if we open up, refresh, now all the images should not be hanging over the edge, and that should look better. That's 80% of the screen is what it's taking up. Okay, so we're going to bounce back and forth on this. Let's kind of look at our design that we have ultimately, because we're kind of starting outside in. So this would be me actually designing my header, not setting up the overall grid. So here's kind of like the overall grid for my index page. So here's like my header with my hero image. I have my aside, and then I have my main content. And then I don't have on here, but that would be my footer at the bottom. So let's go ahead and set that up. Later on, we will want to actually set these up as a separate grid inside the grid to be able to do those layouts. So in order to do that, we need to understand how our page is kind of set up. The body, I have mentioned before, is the body is the main part that holds all the visual parts of my page. And in this case, it is holding the header, the main, the aside, and the footer. Okay. Now, when we're building grid, it's important to understand these things. I have to have a parent element. And that parent element, when I set that up as grid, then all of the direct children will be the grid items. This will make more sense if you guys went through CSS Diner and CSS Grid Garden. So if you're not there yet, just bear with me. Okay. Direct children means that there is no element in between the parent element and the element in question. So the header is a direct child of the body. This H1 is not a direct child of the body. It is a direct child of the header. The header is a direct child of the body. Okay? You would say the H1, the ancestor is the body, but it is not. The direct parent would be the header, not the body. Okay? So when we're looking at setting up a grid, we need to locate the parent that has those direct children. Now we can create and combine, like what I mentioned in the other video, using div to get those direct children if there's a different way that we want to break it up. But this is the best way to do it. So when I first start looking at my page, I look at the body and see if I set up grid, could I do that to design my header, the main, the aside, and the footer, and just get it basically a general layout, and then I can jump from there to get my other pieces. Okay, so let's do that. So inside style, we need to set up the grid. So display grid, then I need to give it some columns. So grid, template, columns. And keep in mind, I am doing, when we look at the picture, this is my header, this is my main content, this is my aside. So that's really 2 columns, okay? The main could have more. This looks like it could be 3 columns. It actually could be 3 columns and 3 rows, if that's how I wanted to look at it for the main, okay? Because this text and the images inside main are not direct children to the body. So I can't worry about them now. I'm worrying about only the direct children. Okay, so I'm going to say I want a 2-column layout, and for whatever reason, this is not operating how I want, but grid area, or excuse me, grid template areas is how I would want to kind of do my layout. So I would say, you know, hey, like this is my header is going to take up 2 columns. I'm going to have my main, and then the aside is going to be on the right, and then I'm going to have my footer taking up 2 columns. Finish it off with a semicolon. Okay. And then for that to properly work, I need to map them. So my header as my selector needs to have set as a grid area of header. And for whatever reason, Atom is requiring it to have at least single or double quotes in there for it to operate, but normally it does not need that, just so you know. Grid area main. I need to make sure that I'm spelling them the same as what I see here. Now, again, I was saying that I was having an issue, and there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. So even if we have to overcome, it's all right. Footer, grid area, footer. All right, so now we got those main areas. Oops. Let's save. Now we can go and look in our brand. Let's refresh, Control R. All right, we already got where stuff started snapping. Now, to make it easier, I usually add backgrounds, really gaudy, ugly colors, just so that I can see what I'm looking at. It makes it easier for me, and then I can pull those colors off later. So background, let's see, light green, aside, let's do background, light blue, and footer. Let's do, I don't know, teal. Okay. So now we see some colors. Okay. So my headers, this is what 2FR is. 2FR means that I broke up my page into 3 fractional units, and 2 of them is the header space, or that first column. The second one is the main. Now, I wanted my header to actually go across. This was the error that I was talking about. Yours might be operating, but if it's not operating like it's supposed to, then I can specifically say I want the header to go to span 2 columns. I also want that to happen for my footer too, which is there. So that's grid column. Again, CSS Grid Garden, this is really helpful in this understanding what we are doing. So now I have them where this is my header. It's taking up the whole space. I have my main, my aside. Again, those images, those are massive. And it's sizing based off the content. Okay. So if I wanted to space this out more, okay, because right now it is spaced based on the content, and then we have our plank, which that didn't actually take a color. Teal must not be a color. Oops. Background. There you go. Okay. All right. So what I can do then is here I can actually set my rows and give it some heights. So grid template rows, and I could, specify what I want. Maybe I want auto or content width or all kinds of stuff for that header area, and then for my main content, that middle one, this middle one, I want quite a bit of space. So maybe I want it where it's like, say, 300 virtual height, and then auto. Let's go ahead and see where we're at. Okay, so as we see, this is actually bleeding over, so that is not near enough. So let's bump this up. Let's do maybe 500. I still have some space, so if we want to be able to space these out and have plenty of room, we want to make sure that the grid items are big enough. So even on here, we're still going over. So when my number is really large, that means, like the 900, that means that I'm scrolling 9 times, my full screen scroll. So this is 50, or auto, okay? So it's just fitting that space. And then here, if I was starting at the top, this would be 9 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 9 times. And then this was auto, so it's fitting my stuff. So then I can go through here and I can actually start spacing out stuff, doing whatever I want for the layout. Again, I have really, really large images, but I have basically set up grid with only a little bit of code. Okay. Now the other thing that we would want to do is we would want to start doing some media queries. And W3 Schools is a really good resource. Media queries. Okay. So basically what we need to do is we need to create the media queries, and you guys seen the video. The other one already has it. We're just going to use this to pull. We could do separate style sheets if we really wanted to, but I actually think it's better to have one style sheet, and then we are just choosing what's happening. So like this, let's go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to go to the very bottom of my code. Okay, and I want inside here, okay, so in between these two brackets, what I want to happen. Now this is saying that it's applying to screens and that the max width of whatever is happening here is no bigger than 600. So if we're doing, say, tablet size, tablets are usually around 800 to 1,000 pixels for the width. Cell phones are usually maxing out at 500 pixels. Okay, some of them are a little bit different, but we can use this to our advantage. Okay, so this should hit most of the sizes, and so now what we're doing is we're deciding based off of our different sizes what it should actually look like when we go to the different size of stuff. So here's our brand. Let's see what our picture looks like. Okay, so my aside now goes down to the bottom, and then all of my main stuff is right here. So it's header, main, aside, and footer. So when we're doing a media query, we need to override anything that needs to change. Okay, so in this case, that's what we're going to do. I'm copying everything, but I'm not going to keep everything. I'm not overriding display grid. That's still happening. I am going to override this. I am going to override this. This should technically get overridden. Now this would be the way that I would prefer to do it. Okay. And then I'm thinking in terms of one column, so I could go down to 1FR. I might do maybe a width of, let's say, 90% of the screen. So let's do VW for virtual width. And then maybe I want to do margin auto so I can have that a little bit centered. Okay. And then, so I got one grid column. Now I'm actually going to have multiple rows. So main and aside, let's bump those. And I'm pretty sure that we don't need all that. So let's go ahead and check. Okay. So now when we scale down, we should see it snap. Okay, so it's snapping. It's not snapping exactly what we want. That goal is still there. Okay, so what we need to look at is, because it's still trying to snap, what we could see here, though, is that we have the header spanning 2 columns. That may be problematic. So let's go down here. We're going to take that and we're going to override. So I don't need it to span 2. I can have it span 1. I'm going to take this off because I don't need it to override. Let's see if that starts to fix it. Okay, we do see that it's kind of snapping in the middle, but I still see that Pirate Coffee and then the goal is taking a different thing. So that is a problem. Okay, and then footer, we are going to have to do the same thing. So footer, let's fix that. Okay, grid column start. We want it to start at 1. And we want it to finish at 2. Grid column start or end. Finish at 2. Let's work. And then footer, same thing. Keep in mind, you're not looking at the column numbers, you're looking at the lines. So that would be line 1, 2, 3. There shouldn't be 3. We should not have 3, or 2 columns, excuse me. So this may be causing an issue. See if the other stuff's resized. Okay, so locations, that's resizing. That seems like that's more than enough. We could remove some. And then we have our footer. And our footer is still taking up everything. Okay, so again, this is acting kind of weird. We could do this, though. Because there's lots of different ways to try to set up grid. So I will just say 3. There you go. I really don't want to write it that way. I still want to do it this way. But goal doesn't want to run. Okay. So, well, when it chooses to do that, so then what are we doing for main then? Main, we're actually overriding because this doesn't want to operate. So then we're forcing it to run with that. So header, main, aside, we're forcing it to start at the column lines that we want. There we go. Okay, so this would be like an example of like the tablet. So when I'm looking at desktop, as my desktop, I get down small enough to tablet size and it snaps now to the tablet look for the size. Now, keep in mind, I'm only doing like the major parts for header, main, aside, and footer. I will later on go down and delve deeper into here. Okay, now for what we have for main, I got some extra space. For my aside, I got some extra space. That's probably good. and then I have my footer. Okay. Now, if we were going down to this size, so we wanted to shrink down smaller. In this case, it looks like it's going to be very similar. Now, let's just go ahead and double check what we look like for our cell phone. Okay, so that's got to get set. That's the header, though. Okay, so a header, main content, the aside, but I'm changing where the text and stuff is for the images. So that's still, we're set up to be able to do that. So when we shrink down our tablet size, in this case, our tablet size and our cell phone size work. Okay. Now, what's some stuff that I could probably do? Well, we already talked about like the text and the image, the placement of those. That's going to change, but that's not this grid. That's going to be a grid within the grid. So I'm going to have a separate grid for the main. I'm going to have a separate grid for header. I'm going to have a separate grid for the footer and for the aside. But in this case, that's how I would set this up. Very simply, I'd put some CSS in to get the layout that I wanted. Very simply, I overrode what I needed for getting the specific sizes. Even if we were having some issues, we could work around them by writing our code in a little bit different way. Okay, so with this video for the walkthrough and everything that we did for the other video walking through viewport, media queries, and CSS grid, you guys have all the tools to understand how to do grid for your pages to start designing your layout. In future videos, we will go through specifically the headers, start doing the navigation, and then we're going to go through the main, start actually doing that layout, and then do the aside and actually do that layout. Okay, but to introduce you to this, we have to do grid starting from outside in. So the major parts, the direct children of the body, and then we will do organizing using div for header and all that stuff to get the direct children inside there. All right, good luck, have fun.